Hello and welcome to Culture Over Coffee, a podcast focused on improving company culture and fostering employee engagement. Every week we chat with experts and thought leaders about the latest information and proven practices you can use to reduce regrettable turnover, increase productivity on your team, and retain key customers. So pour a cup of your favorite brew and join us. I'm your host, Beth Sunshine, SVP at Up Your Culture and the Center for Sales Strategy. In this episode, we're continuing our deep dive into each of the 4 engagement elevators, and today we're taking a ride in elevator number 4, Earn Trust. This is the elevator where people mean what they say and live the values they espouse every day, which are reflected in their day-to-day actions. And when it comes to discussing Earn Trust, it's hard to do better than a chat with Allison Delagrange, General Sales Manager at Federated Media. Allison makes so many amazing points, like why you should never underestimate the value of communication, how keeping a watchful eye on your company campfire can go a long way towards fostering and maintaining trust among your employees, and how, contrary to popular thought, good business is personal. Allison, thank you so much for joining me today for Culture Over Coffee. We have, we've worked together for a long time now in the talent world. I was thinking, is it 15 years? Is that right?
Almost. Yeah.
Almost?
15 years. So
oh my gosh.
A decade and a half to make it feel even longer, right?
Yeah. And you look younger every time I see you.
You're so
that
sweet.
is really crazy. You have always paid such close attention to all the things that matter to me: hiring top talent, coaching people to maximize their strengths, retaining them over time. I know how important your people are to you. And one of the things I think you've done really well over the years is earning their trust. And that's really what I want to focus on today. So I was really glad you were able to do this with us. At Up Your Culture, you know this, but there are 4 engagement elevators that we use to lift culture or to elevate engagement. That's where the elevator term comes from. And we've been talking about them over the course of this season's podcast. The 4th elevator, I think, is potentially kind of the key to it all.
Yeah.
You probably know we call it Earn Trust.
Yeah.
And we believe it's especially important because even if you do everything else right, even if you create a strong shared mission and you focus on people development, all those things, if you don't earn their trust, if your people don't truly trust you, there's just no way you can have a thriving culture. So right. I'd like to especially focus on that with you today and get your perspective on a variety of subjects, mostly related to earn trust. But I do have kind of a general question just to start us off. Sound good?
Good. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Good. Oh, me too. All right. So I'd like to start with just, like I said, a very general question just about culture and engagement before we dig into earn trust. Why do you think that it's important to focus on company culture? Why is it important to focus on employee engagement? What benefits have you seen for companies or for employees when that is a focus?
Right. It's such a good question. And I could seriously camp out on this for an entire podcast, but I won't do that. So, but a few things that come to mind. First of all, it's so timely right now for a few different reasons. One, it's no secret that a lot of people are working remote or some hybrid version of remote work plus in office. So it's not enough anymore to say, we're going to put a pool table and a fancy coffee machine in the break room and check the culture box, because people are not in one central location for the most part. So it's got to be about shared values and those intangibles. Not only that, but nobody wants to talk about COVID anymore, but it did cause people to be face-to-face with mortality and think through things like purpose and having meaning in their work. And, that's also led to this whole idea of quiet quitting and, people that are still working, but taking pride in doing less. So now there's this opportunity really for companies that have a well-defined culture to retain employees because they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, but also it's a great opportunity for recruitment. Everybody's having trouble finding good people. But if you have a sense of who your company is, people want to be part of that. And what that looks like for Federated Media specifically, it was so well timed for us to work with Up Your Culture right before COVID hit, because, we had no idea what was coming, but we took a hard look over the course of a year with Up Your Culture, really partnering together and saying, okay, how do people feel about working here? And let's take a hard, honest look at this. And we identified things that we needed to work on. And we also were articulating our core values. So then when COVID hit and we were all, separated, we still knew what we stood for. And we had those things to hold on to. And then fast forward to this year, we've really focused on what we offer that separates us in this crazy recruitment environment. And we've focused on work-life balance. So what that looks like for me is, over the last year, I've been able to recruit a couple new people who they actually took a pay cut to come join my team because they liked the work-life balance that we offer. And they see that we actually mean it. We've implemented things like flexible paid time off. So, you can take the time that you need with your family. So it's so important to focus on company culture and engagement, to both retain the people that you have and then grow your business too.
I love the way you approach that, talking about it really from recruitment, which, yes, it's such a pain point right now, all the way to retention.
Yeah.
And what I will say about you and everyone we work with at Federated Media is you don't let things just be a philosophy. You put things into action. So it's interesting. I think it probably was very good timing for us to work together, because you really followed through on things that were an anchor for you. So I'm glad you answered it that way. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Moving into then the topic of earned trust, we've found that when companies are really transparent, when they promote transparency and their employees feel as though they are getting the information they need, in general, they have more confidence.
Right.
They have more confidence in company decisions, more confidence in the faith and integrity of their leaders. What are some ways that you think, from the very highest levels, like even at the executive level, that a company can earn the trust of their employees?
Yeah. So I think that transparency is so important, and also just consistent communication. So employees want to hear from top level leadership. So if you are in a position like that, never underestimate the value of your communication. And it doesn't have to just be when there's some major announcement. Communicate the big things, communicate the small things too. Our general manager started doing a weekly update. So on Fridays, there's an email that goes out that says, here's what's happening. And it's not all, here's who had the biggest sales this week, or, the major news. It's also the smaller things that happen, recognizing company or employee birthdays or anniversaries, and recognizing the smaller teamwork efforts that are happening. So it's a consistent message that goes out every week. And I think it just makes people feel more connected to leadership. Communicating that vision and how people all play a role in that. Those are ways that leaders can help establish that trust. And also, don't underestimate the value of being involved in the grunt work. Earlier this year, we had a major change that required everybody to stop and do a lot of data entry into a new system that we were using. And kudos to my general manager, because he said, you know what, we're all going to have to roll up our sleeves and do this. And he said, here's the orders that I'm going to put in.
Wow.
I think that's really powerful. Are you going to be a leader that is just sipping your coffee while everybody else is doing the work? Or are you going to get involved? That goes a long way with establishing trust, just to say that, I'm in this with you and I'm willing to do the work also.
I love that. Transparency weekly. I like just the connection to the human element, not just recognizing the sales, but touching what's happening with the people, and sure, rolling up your sleeves and diving in. These are really good tips.
Yeah.
So as long as we're talking about transparency, then, I was flipping through our Engage 2022 report last night when I was kind of thinking about this conversation we were going to have. And I noticed that 72% of the people who responded to our survey said they work for a company that provides an open forum, sort of a town hall. We sometimes call them an Ask Me Anything meeting. I was actually pleasantly surprised. 72% said that they do have some sort of forum where employees can ask unfiltered questions. Is that something, that open forum meeting, something that you would recommend?
So it's a tricky answer. And I think it depends on a couple of things. One is the people you have, and two is the topic. So I love the analogy that Up Your Culture has about the company campfire. So if you haven't read it yet, the idea is that there's 3 different types of engagement. So there's the people that are engaged. And if you're at a company campfire, they're the ones that are rubbing sticks together and trying to create a spark and keep the fire going. There's the people that are, disengaged, that are kind of just hanging out. They're there for the company campfire, but they're not necessarily contributing. And then there's those dangerous people who are actively disengaged. They're taking logs out of the fire and putting water on it. So if you look at the people in your company and you're in a spot where you know that you have a lot of those people that are going to pour water on the fire, now's not a good time for one of these open forum meetings. You got to do recruitment first and get the right people there. The other thing is the topic. If you know that you're going to discuss a topic that you really aren't open for feedback about, this is a decision that's been made. This is the direction we're going. Feedback is not welcome. Then that's not an open forum type of situation. But, so if you do have, for the most part, the people that you want on your team, I'm not just talking about a couple outliers that everybody, everybody's got one, right?
Not the bad apple, but in general.
If you, for the most part, have the people and it's a topic that you really do welcome their feedback, by all means, do it. Have that open forum. And there's a couple things you can do to make it go smoothly. I think if this is something new, it might be wise to have people submit some questions ahead of time and maybe even give them a chance to do it anonymously if you don't have that earned trust yet and people feel more comfortable, not letting everybody know who's asking the question. And maybe give your leadership a chance to look at them ahead of time too, so that they can be really prepared, because it's also fair to put out there like, hey, we're going to take your feedback. That doesn't mean that we're going to be able to implement everything you say, but we are going to listen. And doing that, again, gives people that sense of ownership and that they matter. And that's ultimately, I think, what people want.
Those are some good best practices. So you need the right people in the town hall in order to have a good town hall meeting. So kind of goes back to what you were saying, like recruiting the right people, making sure that you've got the culture that you want, and then you can more openly open the doors. I like that. Also defining the topic, asking for questions in advance, allowing them to be anonymous. I love that. In our company, we do a quarterly, we call it a state of the state, where we sort of put it all out there. I've never seen a company as transparent, although I know there are lots of levels of it. And we do the same thing. We ask for questions, any question in advance, and every question gets a response. Sometimes it's going to be a public discussion in the town hall. Sometimes it could be a more private, let's talk more seriously about this since it matters to you. Any other best practices that jump to mind?
I think just whoever's leading it, make sure that they're prepared to just take it all in. You don't have to have a response to everything in that moment. Just being willing to listen and have an open mind, because so often people just want to be heard. So to not have an immediate answer for every question is okay. I think people are accepting of that.
Well said. I love that. And I agree. People want to be heard.
Yeah.
Okay, looking more specifically about you and the role you play in earning trust with your team, I'm sure you'd agree it's difficult for an employee to feel engaged if they don't like or trust their manager.
Right.
They have to really feel like you care about them, you have their back. The Engage 2022 report revealed, and this was sort of heartbreaking to me, only 64% of employees that responded believe that their manager always does what they say they will do. And 28% reported that they can only trust their managers sometimes. And I just think there's a lot there to unpack. So I just want to start with, first, what is your reaction to those numbers?
Well, first of all, ouch, right? Because, sometimes the truth hurts. But second, I'm not really surprised. And I think there's a few things that could be going on. First, I would say most managers have the intention to do what they say that they're going to do all the time. But sometimes there are things that happen and things that are out of our control, and we're human. We mess up. So in those cases, you can either ignore it and move on, or you can do something that, you could say a couple words that aren't often used in a business setting, and that's, I'm sorry. Here's where I messed up, and here's how I'm going to fix it. So that's one thing that could be going on. I think also we forget that there's so much boss watching that happens, and people want to know why you do the things that you do. So for an example, when I first started as a sales manager, I dove into the role knowing that a lot of what I had to do was recruitment. So I was having a lot of people in the office for interviews. I'm just doing my job, right? Well, what's that do to the people that are currently there working? They're wondering, okay, is this new person that just came in the door for an interview, is that my replacement? Am I on the hot seat? And that does something to them mentally. So once I realized that there was that concern, I started in my onboarding process just telling people the why behind that. Well, it's not, I'm recruiting all the time, not because our, turnover is super high, and not because you're not doing your job, but because we believe that talent is rare. So we can't wait until we have an opening to start searching for the next rock star. We want you to have good teammates, and we know it's going to take a while. Mm-hmm. So things like that, communicating the why behind what you do, that can play into it too. And the last thing I would say that sometimes happen that's really unfortunate is that there's some people that are in management for the wrong reasons. And that's going to ruin the trust too, because if you have come into management because it was, you wanted the title or it felt like the next step on the ladder, those types of people make it all about them. Mm-hmm. It really should be all about the people you're coaching. And so I think maybe that's why some of these people have responded to the survey in the way that they did.
It's a really interesting take, and I think you're spot on. I think human nature is to want to grow, to want to improve. And so in sales specifically, a really great salesperson often thinks, to grow here, I need to become a manager. Yeah. And you're exactly right that someone can be born for sales and not at all cut out to be a great manager. And that works the other way around too.
Totally.
I hadn't thought about, until you said that, how you could sort of lose trust if you are more focused on yourself and your career than on the people around you. Really eye-opening, and thank you for saying that. Yeah. Any strategies you'd recommend that managers use, tips to earn trust on their team?
Yeah, well, so you have to make it personal. There's a phrase that we hear a lot that kills me, and it's that it's not personal, it's just business. Well, when we're talking about culture, we're asking people to be emotionally involved with their work, to care about it, to want to do their best. And so we're not managing robots here. If we were, this culture conversation wouldn't matter. So good business is personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with, using great tools like the growth guide, where you're actually sitting down and having a conversation that's all about that person. Tell me about what you like about your job. Tell me about your goals. Tell me about what motivates you. Learning those things and then putting them into practice. I love the question, when you're successful, who do you want to hear about it? If you find out the answer to that question and that person says, my mom, my dad, my spouse, and then you actually do it, that is such a powerful way to earn trust, because they feel like, oh my goodness,
right,
you listened and you acted on it. So things like the growth guide, but also just setting clear expectations and giving consistent performance feedback. It's so important to tell people not just what they're doing wrong, but what they're doing right. Because then they can duplicate it, right? So much of coaching is like parenting. I have small children, and if we go out to eat and afterwards I say, hey, I'm really proud of you, you did a good job in there, I can't assume that they know why it was good. So if I take the time and I say, I liked the way that you sat still in your chair. I liked how polite you were to the server. I liked how you cleaned up your area. They know what to do for the next experience to also be good. And it's so simple, but it's the same way with adults. They want to know, what can they do to be good the next time? Don't let them get lost in wondering what's important. And then the other thing is just do what you say you'll do. If you say you're going to do something, then do it. And if for some reason you can't, tell them why.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm human too.
I love that. Love the analogy about your children, because you're exactly right. Even though we're talking about adult professionals here, it's the same thing. We need to know specifically what is leading to success. And you kind of got the bookends there, setting expectations and then noticing those positive behaviors along the way. Great ideas for earning trust. And of course, you talked about the growth guide, which is my love language. So,
yeah,
we're on the same page there.
That's great.
So let's we only have a couple minutes left, few minutes maybe. I want to flip this around for just a moment, because we've been talking about trust builders so far, but I also know that there are some things that I would consider trust breakers. So what are some things you think managers should specifically avoid if they want to be sure not to break the bonds of trust they have with their people?
Right. So some of them are obvious, like, being deceitful. Don't do that. Don't tell lies. Don't put someone in a position where they're not going to be successful. The person who can't think on their feet, don't call them out in the middle of a meeting and say, what do you think about that? You don't want to embarrass them. Don't, do a growth guide and find out what motivates them and then just forget about it. It's almost better if you wouldn't have done it in the first place then, because now that you know this about them, you have a responsibility. You can't just be blissfully ignorant anymore.
Powerful. That's true.
Inconsistency. You want to avoid that. I mean, we've all worked with someone that, or at least I think so, that shows up and you're never sure which version of them you're going to get that day. Are you going to be the one that's on top of it and looking for paperwork and all the I's dotted and T's crossed, or are you just going to be the one that's kind of disengaged today? Like, you got to be consistent. And the one thing I thought about that's a little, outside the box, I guess, is just avoid overpromising. So we know that doing what you say you're going to do, it's very important. And I think as managers, we have the to-do list is longer than the day is, right?
Yeah.
So be cautious about, setting some boundaries about what you are actually able to do and the time frame in which you're able to do it. Because it's one thing to say, like, I'm here for you and I'll give you a timely response, but it's another to be, held to, I'm going to respond within an hour. Well, sometimes that's not always feasible. So avoid overpromising by setting some boundaries of what actually is realistic for you as a manager.
Set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Very good. Oh, well, I could just do this all day with you, honestly. I even said at the beginning, we're going to want to have you as a guest again sometime in the future, because I think you have such a great perspective on so many things. But I like to end our coffee chat with a quick question. So Here's the question. In just a sentence or two, what would be the one piece of advice you would give your closest friends if they asked you how to improve culture or to improve engagement at their company right now? One tip, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say schedule time on your calendar to focus on culture. We all know how things get busy, and culture is probably not going to be it probably won't ever feel like the most urgent and important item on your to-do list. So you've got to schedule time to think about it and use that time to figure out a way to get some feedback. You can partner with Up Your Culture for sure to come up with structured ways to get that feedback, and then come up with a plan and focus on just a couple of things that you want to improve. You can overwhelm yourself and think, oh my goodness, I can't do any of this. So then nothing gets done. Just pick a couple things, but start by just blocking out some time on your calendar for it so that you get some things done to impact culture.
Priceless advice. A bunch of us were just talking yesterday about how if you ask any leader in any company, anywhere, if culture or engagement is important, every one of you will say yes. Every one of you will tell you that it's a priority. Not every one of you, every one of them will tell you that it's a priority. However, doing it is a whole different thing. And you're exactly right. You have to actually schedule time. And I wonder how often that happens because of all the fires that get put out. That's a great place for us to end, something to really think about. How can you schedule that time and make it not just a priority in your mind, but a priority in your business effort? So, very cool stuff. Thank you, Allison, for the time you've spent today talking about culture with me. You've shared a lot of good information, a lot of good ideas. I'm sure our listeners have found them valuable. Now, for those listening, I'm going to drop Allison's contact information in the show notes because she's the best. You're probably going to want to reach out and connect with her at some point. We'll make that easy for you. I'm also going to drop in the link to the Engage 2022 Culture Report. You may want to dive into some of those details as well. So thank you, Allison, and thank you, everyone. Enjoy the journey to Up Your Culture.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for spending time with us on Culture Over Coffee. If you've enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe and join us for every episode. For more helpful information on the topics of company culture and employee engagement, visit us at upyourculture.com.